India has once again called out Pakistan at the highest diplomatic forum, the United Nations Security Council, exposing Islamabad's long-standing role in exporting terrorism across borders. Citing decades of cross-border terror, including the 26/11 Mumbai attacks and the recent barbaric killings of civilians in Pahalgam, India has demanded global accountability. In a searing rebuttal to Pakistan's propaganda, India reminded the world that the real threat to civilian safety comes not from conflict but from state-sponsored terrorism. Here's the full report. Terrorism has today emerged as the gravest threat to global peace. It strikes at the very foundations of democracy, freedom, and human progress, threatening not only nations but the very future of mankind. India, one of the worst hit victims of cross-border terrorism, has endured decades of violent attacks orchestrated and backed by its hostile neighbor, Pakistan. But India is no longer just a victim. It is now a global leader in counter-terrorism efforts, working in concert with the world's major economies to dismantle terror networks and expose their state sponsors. At the recent session of the United Nations Security Council, India once again turned the spotlight on Pakistan. Addressing the international community, India's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Parvathaneni Harish, issued a stinging indictment of Islamabad's role in supporting and sheltering terror outfits. He described Pakistan's participation in the debate on the protection of civilians as a mockery of the forum's principles, calling it an affront to the victims of terrorism across the region.
India has experienced decades of Pakistani-sponsored terrorist attacks across our borders. This has ranged from the horrific 26/11 attack on the city of Mumbai to the barbaric mass murder of innocent tourists in Pahalgam in April 2025. The victims of Pakistani terrorism have been predominantly civilians, since its objective has been to attack our prosperity, our progress, and our morale. For such a nation to even participate in a discussion on protection of civilians is an affront to the international community.
India's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Parvathaneni Harish, didn't hold back in his address. In a scathing statement, he accused Pakistan of not just exporting terrorism but also willfully endangering civilian lives. Citing a recent cross-border shelling incident, Ambassador Harish revealed that the Pakistani army deliberately targeted Indian border villages earlier this month, killing more than 20 civilians and injuring over 80 others. He further stated that the religious sites, including gurudwaras, temples and convents, as well as medical facilities, were intentionally attacked, underscoring Pakistan's utter disregard for humanitarian norms. Calling out Islamabad's duplicity, Ambassador Harish declared, "A nation that makes no distinction between terrorists and civilians has no credentials to speak about protecting civilians." Calling out Islamabad's duplicity, Ambassador Harish declared, "A nation that makes no distinction between terrorists and civilians has no credentials to speak about protecting civilians." He dismissed Pakistan's participation in the UNSC debate on civilian protection as gross hypocrisy and part of a larger pattern of disinformation.
Earlier this month, the Pakistani army deliberately shelled our border villages, killing more than 20 civilians and injuring more than 80. There was intentional targeting of places of worship, including gurudwaras, temples and convents, as well as medical facilities. To preach at this body after such behavior is grossly hypocritical. Let us be clear. Protection of civilians should not serve as an argument for protection of UN-designated terrorists. The international community must come together on zero tolerance for terrorism and calling out those who sponsor and defend it.
Hostilities along the line of control ended after both sides held Director General level talks on May 10th. But India has made it clear ceasefires and diplomacy cannot be a substitute for meaningful irreversible action against terrorism. Until Pakistan takes tangible steps to dismantle its terror infrastructure, peace in the region will remain elusive. India has also urged the global community, including the UN and FATF, to intensify pressure on Pakistan, which remains a safe haven for groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, despite repeated international warnings and designations.